It's time to talk Seattle Seahawks today in the 10 and 20-minute NFL team series. And Seattle is a bit of a mystery team to me, as longtime head coach Pete Carroll is no longer the head coach. We go to Mike McDonald. We have a new staff. We have some optimism with back-to-back pretty good drafts. How did the 2024 draft stack up? What are Seattle's prognostication here for 2024? Let's find out. Let's start this preview right now. When last we saw Seattle, they won 3 of their last 4 games, but tiebreakers eliminated them from the NFL NFC playoffs. Those 3 wins were by a total of 7 points. So management kind of looked at the situation and said, we're kind of spinning our wheels here with Pete Carroll. Pete's very loyal to the players that he has on the staff. And I just got the feeling they wanted to get a fresh start, a fresh approach. One of the things that let them down last year was their run defense, 4.9 per carry allowed, pretty much bottom tier in the NFL. 46% allowed third down conversion rate to opposing offenses. That's not going to get the job done. This stat I find amazing for a Pete Carroll coach team. Almost 6.5 minute deficit in time of possession. They weren't holding on to the ball long enough. They weren't taking teams off the field defensively. That has to change. That's an enormous figure in the NFL to be 6.5 minutes behind in time of possession. And then that 2-4 record versus the NFC West really did them in. So in free agency, they added Sam Howell. Sam's still young as a quarterback, only his 3rd year in the NFL. He's going to push Geno Smith. This is a tough year. This is an important year for Geno Smith and the entire quarterback crew, because we don't know what the quarterback crew is going to look like in 2025. Geno Smith, he's a fine quarterback. He can take you to the playoffs. He has a ceiling. We'll see what the new staff can get out of him. They also added a couple people that's going to help against the run, and that's Jonathan Hankins and Baker as a linebacker. Both of those guys, they recognize, and remember, the head coach McDonald, he comes from Baltimore. This is a very Baltimore-driven approach to the Seattle Seahawks, where they're focusing on a different style of defense, and it starts up front in terms of getting more physical right up front. So I have a feeling that they put their attention right on the defensive line more than anything. And I think that surprised people when it came to the draft, myself included, thinking that when it came to the draft, and I'm going to put up the slide right now here, my initial read was that they needed 2 interior offensive linemen, and that's pretty true going in. We knew that they allowed a lot of sacks. They weren't sharing ball possession, time of possession, as I mentioned. Linebacker was a need. They did lose a couple of linebackers in free agency. Safety and cornerback could be shaped up a little bit as well, especially the safety position. They did subtract 2 tight ends in the offseason, but as we see on this draft board, they added a tight end in the 4th round. So they still have Noah Fant as well. So they still have 2 quality tight ends. The other note I should make is that Ryan Grubb is the new offensive coordinator, and we saw what he did in the state of Washington with the Washington Huskies. That offense was loaded. Obviously, they had a lot of talent with Penix at quarterback, some wide receivers, a tremendous offense that Ryan Grubb oversaw. So this is his first NFL stint. We're going to find out what he brings to the table, but it's an interesting hire, and I think a good hire to mix things up offensively, to be a little less predictable offensively for the Seattle Seahawks. So in the draft, they go with my number 1 rated defensive tackle, Byron Murphy. And at first I was puzzled by the pick, but now, based on the stats that I've already mentioned, is that we're talking about a defense that couldn't get off the field, allowed 4.9 yards per carry. That's 2 carries and you've got a first down against you. Byron Murphy can stop the run. He's a load in the middle. This is a Baltimore staple. They're bringing the Baltimore defense to Seattle. I like this pick, and I especially like it since they added 2 rated offensive line later in the draft. Christian Hayes was my 4th rated offensive guard. He had a 3rd round grade for me. And the Utah guard that they selected in the 6th round, I had him with a straddled 4th and 5th round grade. So I don't see any problem in adding those 2 people to the interior offensive line. I think they did a fine job in this area. Picks in the 4th and 5th round. You see the linebacker. Linebacker was a need, but Knight was rated. He's a little soft. I don't think he has great take-on skill. I had him with a 6th round grade, so I think they could have done better at linebacker. Barner, I also had as a 6th round grade, and Pritchett, the cornerback, I had as 6th round grade. In fact, DJ James, they drafted 2 from Auburn, 2 for the price of 1, as the GM said in his press conference. I had James rated a little bit higher than Pritchett, but obviously they attacked the cornerback need and they attacked the offensive line, the interior offensive line need. I would have liked to seen a higher rated linebacker chosen, and I would have liked to see them address safety, unless one of the cornerbacks is going to move to safety or nickel. I think they could have done a little bit more. They've drafted some very strong talent recently in the defensive backfield. Obviously, Witherspoon at cornerback was a tremendous pick last year. So Seattle, this draft was decent. They had killed the draft in 2022 and 2023. But overall, if you take this as a 3-year project, Seattle's definitely gotten better using the draft. And they've been, after years of being unconventional in draft day acquisitions, they've actually done a much better job of being more conventional and hitting their needs. So this is very interesting to me. When we look at the schedule, and I'm not going to have the schedule up here, but I am going to point out that before we get into divisional and season win futures, the schedule is interesting because the 3 opponents Seattle plays that the Rams, San Francisco, and Arizona do not play are the New York Giants, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Denver Broncos. And Seattle should be competitive in all 3 of those games. As we know, the NFC will have 9 home games this year. So there's a chance that Seattle, even though there are some areas of concern, can replicate their 9-8 record and make a push for the playoffs based on the schedule. The hard part of the schedule, the difficult part of the schedule is at the end, because this team has a negative 13 rest differential to begin with, which in and of itself isn't bothersome, but the miles that Seattle has to travel every year. And again, it's the most miles that any team has to travel. Seattle from December on out, they're going to go to play the New York Jets. Let's see if I have the schedule in front of me. They're going to go to play the New York Jets. Then they're going to come back to the West Coast, play at Arizona. They've got some interesting home games in December, which could be tiebreaker games with Green Bay and Minnesota. If San Francisco wins the NFC West, Seattle's going to compete with Green Bay, Minnesota, and others for wild card spots, including the Rams, of course, who they have to travel to on closing day. So you look at this schedule: at the Jets, at Arizona, home to Green Bay, home to Minnesota, at Chicago, and then at the Rams. A lot of mileage, 4 road games. That's a difficult December. They need to hit the ground running with the new staff. I wonder if they're going to be able to do that. Their particular bye week is kind of in the middle, so it's not a terrible bye week. When we get to their season win total, it's mostly 7.5. I think that's a fair number. I think they can beat that number, but they're going to have to get off to a quick start to beat that number, because I'm worried about December. Their divisional odds at FanDuel plus 750. I think that's a stretch. The Rams have a little bit more experience. If the Rams have done as good a job as Seattle has in drafting, both the Rams and Seattle have built themselves up for the future. And they're definitely playoff worthy teams this year, but they may cancel each other out. I don't think they have the firepower to compete with San Francisco for the division, but maybe a slight lean over for division wins. But it's all going to depend on December. Here's my final thoughts. Again, we look at these notes that I've made here. How seamless will this coaching change be? I mean, Pete Carroll was beloved there in Seattle. Was it time for a change? Perhaps because Pete was stubborn. Again, he was loyal to his players, but they're going to miss the teaching aspect of what Pete brings to the table. I truly believe that. I like the new staff, but it's still going to be not as seamless, perhaps, as we might think. Is a 3-2 or a 4-1 start realistic? The opponents aren't that difficult to start. How fast can they hit the ground running? They have an experienced quarterback in Geno Smith, a good run game, 2 tremendous wide receivers, really 3 because they drafted one last year that fits. It's a really top 5 wide receiver core, and some experience showing up defensively as well, along with some changes. Is that a realistic start? I do expect improvement defending the run right away with the 2 free agent acquisitions and Murphy. In fact, the top 3 players that they drafted are slated to start this year. As I said before, a tricky December and January. And Ryan Grubb, what does he bring to the table in his first NFL appearance? That's going to be interesting. Will the staff, get buy-in from the players? How fast can they start? If they start quickly, this is going to be a team that you better watch out for. Mystery team to me, Seattle. A lot of good parts. I like the future. I think they're going to be a prime playoff contender. Any comments you want to leave for me on YouTube or on Twitter, please do. I'll answer them. What are your thoughts on the Seattle Seahawks? More shows coming all week long. In fact, in about 45 minutes from now, if you're watching live, I'll be on with Brady Cannon, Las Vegas golfer. He's going to give his thoughts on the presumed favorite in this division and maybe the favorite in all of the NFC, the San Francisco 49ers. That's coming up at noon today. Catch it live or catch it on YouTube. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you very soon.